Hi, my name is Bill Stierle, and I'm here with Jonathan Kraut. And today, we'd like to talk to you a little bit about net check investigations. We're going to introduce you to the Information is Power Investigations podcast. Jonathan, tell us a little bit about you and how you've come into this field and a little bit about your company.
All right. Well, this is about my 22nd year as a private investigator. I used to be a professor at a college, and a lot of my students were not finding internship in investigations work, so I got a license, put them to work. Got so busy, I stopped teaching, and since then I've been running this firm and trying to make sure that people are safe and they make good decisions.
So it's really nice to be on this podcast to really kind of share your wisdom, knowledge, and experience. And a big part of decision making is having the right information. And today we'd like to share with you some information about that's really crucial to employers. And let me put up on the screen here the slide deck I have so that the audience can hear this. But also, if you're listening to the audio, you can be able to pick up a lot of valuable information as we talk through the Information is Power Investigations podcast. Jonathan, tell us about the 7 things that the employers need to know.
Right. Well, the obvious thing is that when you do a thorough background check, you'll weed out people that could do you, your company, and your employees harm. And there are a lot of myths that are out there, and I wanted to dispel what those are and then give employers a very logical and easy way to make sure that they're doing the right thing as far as their background check on new employees or candidates and a recheck later on.
Now, I thought you remember, I was remembering that it's really important that in the state of California, as well as other states, for people to know what your private investigations license is. Isn't that a part of the process too, to create trust?
Right. Well, the state goes through great effort to make sure that licensees are knowledgeable and follow the law. The worst thing that could happen is somebody like a law enforcement officer or government official or licensed agency uses their trust and their position to take advantage of others. So we're very careful about doing the right thing as much as we can all the time.
Yeah, it's great. Your license is 21529. So tell us a little bit about the responsibility employers have to keep their people and customers safe and taking the appropriate preventative actions with employment screening. Tell us a little bit about that.
Exactly. Well, employers, by creating an environment, have a responsibility to their people and customers that the environment that people come into are safe. And to do so, that includes not just their employees, but also the safety of their clients, of customers, of visitors, and so forth. We want to protect property, reputation, privacy, and physical objects from being misused.
And they also have other responsibilities.
Right. Well, besides just the physical premises, you're talking about the welfare of individuals that may be exposed to, let's say, you bring in a stalker or sex predator into your workplace. That could have a great impact, a negative impact on other people working in your company.
So the screeners, the screening process is really important.
Yes, absolutely. And in addition to the safety of your employees, employers are responsible for their clients and customers. So, for example, you hire a cashier who has a drug issue or drug problem or embezzlement habit. They could steal the private information of their clients, their social security numbers, credit card information, and so forth. So you want to make sure that the people you bring into a setting have at least the certainty that there's nothing in their criminal record that would indicate a habit of misconduct.
So there's a duty to really kind of check in with them.
Right. And in addition to the initial duty to check in, you want to have a biannual recheck. There are individuals who perhaps weren't caught or arrested or convicted prior to being hired, but because of the way that they think or behave, maybe after they were hired and entrusted with certain responsibilities and certain information, the history will show up later. They could be convicted or arrested after they were hired. You want to check for that as well.
I see. So, we're really getting to why proper background checks are critical then.
Right. And I'll give an example. Not that long ago in Burbank, where our office is located coincidentally, a property management company hired a janitor. They did a local search, a California search for criminal records.
Mhm.
They didn't find anything. So they handed to the janitor all the keys to the property. It's a multi-unit. I think they have 100 or 200 residents in the property, so pretty
Wow.
big. And they didn't know the true history of this janitor.
So because they didn't know the history of the janitor, even though they're still responsible, for that, as a business owner, right?
Right. In this case, what happened was the janitor, who is a sexual predator, was convicted in another state,
Mm.
had an arrest warrant from that other state, did not show up in the California system, and therefore he had access to all the keys. One day he entered into a unit where a young girl, I believe she was 13 or 14, was alone,
Mm.
did assault and rape her. And a court case arose that finally resulted in a multi-million-dollar penalty and fine charged to the apartment complex. So by allowing someone to come in who was known to be from another state,
Right.
to not check their background thoroughly was an issue.
So there's all kinds of challenges here if you're just doing a limited local search,
Correct.
and it's really the responsibility of the employer or the business owner to follow the state license screening agency, and really this whole misconduct search.
Right. If they did a comprehensive misconduct search, it would have taken minutes to realize that the individual had lived in another state. And
Right.
of course, you want to check for records in that state. They would have found a warrant. They would have found he was a sexual predator. They would have found that he was already convicted for the same kind of crime.
Wow. Wow. So imagine what it would be like then to have one of these events or people show up in the listener's world right now. We're really just interested in getting the protection and the safety and the thoroughness that you're really advocating and that your company advocates. Is that
Yes, and
correct?
that's why we're talking today. It's very important that employers know what they can do to protect their company, their employees, their customers, and defend against liability and risk.
So as we get started, there's certain things that people believe that are true that are really not true. Could you take us through the different myths that people have
Yeah.
about employment and employment screening?
The relating to the last example that I gave, myth number one, we could say, is that a state live scan is comprehensive. In reality, the live scan only checks that the state that you're in. It does verify fingerprints and it does go into the FBI system, but it does not check the other states.
I
It
see.
does not look for warrants. It does not locate issues or events that are non-criminal that are very relevant.
I see. So it's very light and it doesn't do the thoroughness that you advocate.
Well, it does check the state that you're in and the FBI records, which is part of it.
Okay.
And
All
I'll,
right.
I'll give you an example of how a live scan led to injury of other people. If you,
Okay. Yeah, please. Yeah. Hmm.
yeah. So not that long ago, an individual purchased a weapon in Aurora, Illinois. There was a national instant background check through the Brady Bill, and it did not locate a relevant criminal case out of Mississippi. And the reason would be that a lot of states voluntarily contribute to the system that there's not one push button index where all the criminal records are kept.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So when his name is Mr. Martin, when he applied for a concealed weapons permit, a little bit later after he purchased a firearm, a case was located.
Mm.
The FBI estimates that about 29% of all adults have a criminal record. About 9% are felons. So if the national instant background check system was adequate, of the 230 million background checks, about 23 million criminal records would have been identified instead of the 1.3 million that have identified. In other words, even the federal instant background check system for purchasing a gun missed about 22 million criminal cases, which is terrible.
That is not so good. That's
Yeah.
what it is. So the thoroughness is really interesting. So the first
Right.
myth is that the state live scam is comprehensive, and we're
Right.
seeing that not to be true. Yeah.
And when Mr. Martin tried to get a concealed weapons permit, a 5-minute skip trace and a hand search found that record in no time, 5 minutes. So while an instant search is through the federal government or state is good in some cases or partially helpful, a hand search would have found that record instantly in a matter of minutes.
And he because he got the weapon, he shot several coworkers.
Yeah, he shot coworkers. I don't know if he killed anybody. I think he hit 4.
Yeah.
And it's because he had access to a weapon that was cleared through an instant state live scan search.
I see. What's the second myth? It says here all criminal activities are filed in the criminal index. Tell us a little bit about the first part of this myth.
Right. Well, so the criminal records include lots of different statuses. For example, dismissed, diverted,
right,
convicted. They need interpretation. So a person who's diverted and not convicted due to drug use and who's in rehab may not show up as a criminal conviction. But it's illegal to, in some cases or many cases, to refuse to hire someone because they're in diversion. Mm-hmm. Of course, they're not going to be working for a pharmaceutical company. That would be a mistake. And their requirements are a little different from a cashier. We use dates of birth and name to identify somebody. So if somebody lies about their date of birth, you may not find it.
I see.
And a lot of the cases that are in the criminal system, index system, are not reportable, meaning it may show up through a search, but because it's been diverted or dismissed, it cannot be used against the person in most cases.
So you've got to really take a look at this myth and to make sure that it includes some of these other elements that a person doesn't want to hire.
Right. So criminal indexes don't include some things related to or commonly related to domestic violence, harassment, stalking, elder abuse, and child abuse.
Really?
Those often are not in the criminal index. They're kept in other indexes.
So the thoroughness is really checking these other indexes, not just one of them.
Right. If you rely on the criminal index only and you use whatever you find, first of all, a lot of it's not admissible, and parts that are admissible may be incomplete.
I see. So take us then through myth number 3, the jurisdictions, because this is something that I had a little bit of confusion about, but after talking with you, I got a little more clarity about.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. So as I just mentioned, jurisdictions vary by level. You have a federal jurisdiction, you have FBI records, you have local and county records, you have state incarceration and probation. They're kept separately. There's no one place where all the records of all the counties and all the states and all local jurisdictions are kept. And so each jurisdiction that applies must be searched separately. Even sex offender by state, which may not be kept at the county level, may be at the state level.
Wow. That's a few different indexes really to trace down to get the thoroughness that an employer would like. Yeah, even medically related things are separate?
Yeah,
Wow.
sometimes medical records are not included in the other records, and
Wow.
there's different systems to check for medical professionals as well.
Okay, so a little bit of bureaucracy for, someone that understands or has the experience of knowing which rock to turn over. You kind of know which rocks to turn over. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, we do, and I assume that licensed investigators who make their business as background checks and screening would know. You'd be surprised that a lot of my fellow professionals don't do background checks, and what I'm disclosing now, they don't know.
Sure, sure. So even they would have a lot of assumptions, as I did, about some of these myths that I would buy into. Is, oh, they did a background check. It's like, you really, what kind?
Right.
So
And
that's
in fact, what disturbs me, and one motivation to making this little podcast is, I watch on TV and hear on the radio, oh, our people are background checked. And what they usually mean is they did an instant search online.
I see.
Myth number 4 would be that an instant search online is sufficient. That's a myth. It is not sufficient. And I'll explain why. You have a question, Bill?
Yeah, I was thinking about like the database is not sufficient, and as I started thinking about that certain the fine point or disclaimers don't are not necessarily in play here. I guess there's
Right.
some things that
If
are
you go
missing.
online and do an instant search, look at the disclaimer. It usually will say, do not use for employment purposes.
Wow,
It is for entertainment purposes only. Does not meet the Fair Credit Reporting Act, which is our umbrella legislation.
Interesting,
Yeah. So
interesting.
let me, if I can, review what an instant search is.
Please, yeah.
Uh, so firms gather information from different counties and different states. They compile a phone book of all the records they have. And when they do an instant search, what they're telling you is any record that we have, we will find. They're not making a promise that they're checking every jurisdiction. They're promising that if you put in a name and date of birth and it's in their index, they'll find it.
Hmm.
The sad part is that about 80% of criminal records are not in these databases.
Wow.
New cases aren't there, arrest warrants aren't there. In fact, most county information is not in this index. So it's basically updated every few months, maybe every year. A lot of county information, like LA County, where we are, a lot of that information is not in these indexes. So if you're paying 10 or 15 or $20 to do an instant search, just know that you cannot be accessing all live and real information instantly. It's
And
not possible.
and it's not going to cover your employment due diligence. It sounds like either,
No,
right? Right.
it's does not protect the employer and does not find out really valuable information.
Yeah. So because the court's not connected to it quite fully.
Right. You still need to verify, even if you did find cases through an instant search, you need to
Right.
verify with the court that that information is accurate. You just can't rely on a database.
Wow. Big difference.
Right.
Yeah. So it doesn't really constitute a valid search. It doesn't.
No.
Yeah.
And the courts have ruled that an instant search is insufficient. So the employer can protect themselves from doing a comprehensive search.
I see. So this kind of brings us around to myth number 5. Once a background check is performed, the employer's obligation is fulfilled. So,
Right.
so tell us some of the time limitations or stamps or things that the employer really needs to know to keep themselves up to date.
Yeah. So for over 20 years, my firm has done hundreds of thousands of background checks. And our experience is that not only should companies rescreen, but about 3% of those who are rescreened have new cases that occurred after the time that they were hired.
Oh
And
my.
typically we rescreen every other year, a biannual rescreening. And
Okay.
even then, 3%, 3 out of 100, have new cases, new issues to include drug use, embezzlement, fraud, all kinds of things that you never think of, assault with a deadly weapon, sex, predatory crimes that occurred after they were hired.
Boy, it seems like the employer just needs to build a system of reliability to cover their due diligence or their protection, their obligations in this
Right.
area.
And when an employer hires somebody, in the original agreement should be something authorizing periodic rescreening,
I
so
see.
that the employer doesn't have to go back and get a new authorization every couple years.
I see. I see. Big difference then.
Yeah.
So as we went through the myths, it kind of really loops us back around to really the topic of this podcast, which are the 7 things employers really need to know about background checks, and why, is a comprehensive background check needed, and what they must know. Could you walk us through the 7 things so that we can get a sense of what this is, what the employers do, so that at least we've got a level of awareness and consciousness about how to get this thing done?
Right. Well, in a way, by listening to the myths, I think that our viewers understand that there is more than one door to open. In fact, on average, there's about 12 different indexes to be searched. So if you do an instant search, you open one door. If you do a live scan, you open 2 more. But you're still missing, imagine 12 doors to be open to find out what someone's history and record is, and you open 3. Anything could be behind the other 9 doors.
Wow.
It's like, let's say you have a 12-wheel truck,
Right.
and
Right.
you need 12 tires. So you go into the dealer and you say, hey, if I buy one, is it cheaper? And they go, sure, here's one. Well, that's the same as doing an instant search.
I see.
You still can't drive it away.
Right.
Then you do a live scan or a state search, you get 2 more tires. You still can't drive it away. So I'm
Right.
very excited to share with our audience that you really, to do a comprehensive search, you need to check all 12 places.
Okay.
So
All
that's
right.
number 1. Is the first thing employers need to know is there are 12 different indexes or searches to be conducted.
Okay. So we've got these 12, things. Tell us about the second thing. The only licensed agencies are authorized. Help us
Right.
out with that.
Yeah. So what distinguishes a private investigations company from others is that we're licensed to acquire private information not open to the public,
I see.
and we can assess character. So your computer or your instant search cannot assess character, and who would testify in court? The computer, as to what they found.
Right.
So we have the ability to do what's called a skip trace, where we use confidential means to verify someone's date of birth, their social, other names that they have used, and where they've lived. So having access to that gives us a lot of information. Believe it or not, convicted criminals often lie about their date of birth.
No. Why would
Yes,
they
do.
ever do? Really? Lie?
Because they know that if you just run the date of birth you gave them, they'll come up clean.
I see.
And so a licensed agency is going to find that and is going to check every date of birth, whether they gave it to us or not, and every name that shows up, whether they gave it to us or not.
And it's like not available to the public unless you have the license of the agent.
Right.
Correct. Yeah.
And that's why an online search is not going to give you a lot of good information.
Okay.
It especially may give you lots of names that don't belong to them, lots of do yourself, and you'll see if you go to one of the online searches about yourself, a lot of stuff is there that's not accurate.
Wow.
So we want to search every date of birth and every known name in every jurisdiction where they've been located, which goes back, a number of years.
And this whole assessment of character, how does that work?
Sure. So assessment of character means, should you hire them or should you not, based on the record that you found.
I see.
We can make suggestions to employers. Obviously, it's up to them, but our report is going to be on letterhead, and that goes in their file. We don't decide if someone should be hired, but we'll provide information. And of course, employers will ask us, what do you think? The
Sure.
guy's only been convicted 5 times of DUI.
Oh boy.
Should we allow him to be one of our delivery guys? We say, well,
Uh,
doesn't look like it. There's going to be a 6th or 7th. He's not learning.
yes, it is. Got it.
Take a great risk. Why not find somebody whose record is clean?
That's true. That's it.
Yeah.
And what is the absorb the liability or lowering the insurance? How does that work?
All right. Well, if certain practices are followed and a licensed agency is conducting a comprehensive search, most insurance companies with liability insurance will give you a discount. And I'm very delighted to share with clients if you want to call me and ask me how that's done.
Okay.
It's a little bit complicated, but we show them what we do and how that helps their lower the liability and risk for the company. And insurance companies are all about mitigating costs.
Boy, if they got the thorough search that would, and the validation of that, I can see how the insurance company would then give them a lower rate. That makes a lot more sense, you know, because
Precisely.
protection's in place. So there are many records. The third part of this thing, there are many records, can only be accessed locally. Tell us a little bit more about the network, I guess.
Right. Well, so we do searches nationally. We check, we have an access to every court system in every county in every state. And anyone doing your background check should do that. A lot of records only can be accessed locally, meaning someone has to walk into the courtroom,
Oh boy.
sit down at the computer, or hand the court clerk a list. And that's the only way to get a record of if that person has something or not that we should be concerned about. So not only can you not access these through the internet, but you can't access them instantly. So it takes maybe 2 or 3 days, but usually 3 days for that information to come back. And there are fees associated with that. So some states charge $6, $10, $15 for a comprehensive criminal or civil record search in that state. So you've got to do it correctly or you're not going to get information.
So you also have access to these agents that also can do hand searches?
Right. Well, we have a network of agents in every county and every state that can do a hand search and make sure that there's nothing in that record or in that file, or if it is, it's reported back to the client so they know exactly what's going on.
So then you kind of know what they're getting themselves into then.
Right. And you've got to connect with the court data system directly, not through an index, which is compiled periodically or may be completely missing. The only way to know is if we directly access that system.
Okay, that's a big difference.
Yeah.
So the fourth tip for employers is the most active warrants are kept by at the county sheriff's department. Tell us a little bit about that.
So someone could have an active warrant for their arrest, which is not in the criminal index of the county. And that arrest warrant may not be kept in the criminal system. It probably, in some cases, would only be kept by the sheriff's department. And unless you check with the sheriff's department, you would not know if a person has an active warrant in that county.
I see.
So obviously, that's an area to be checked. And like I said, it may not be in the criminal index system.
I see. So then there's different processes to go about this search then.
Right. Let's say somebody was pulled over and ran off. They know who it is. They've got their fingerprints from the car. They have a picture of the person. But since they're not arraigned, they may not be in the county or local criminal system yet. There's just an arrest warrant.
I see. Boy, that's a big difference. And, you know, there is some misconduct, I guess, is number 5. So tell us a little bit about the misconducts that are not in the criminal search.
I would say that one of the most important messages of the video today is that a lot of misconduct is not in the criminal system. An example is civil harassment and stalking is usually kept in the civil system. Orders of protection, restraining orders may be considered domestic or family law, and domestic violence may not be kept in the criminal system. A tragic story is that one of our clients said, gee, this guy has nothing in the criminal record, and the judge said, well, then, you know, he's a good guy. There's nothing to go back on. Well, but the woman had heard of something that had happened in a different county. We checked for family and domestic records, and we found this guy had restraining orders, violation of orders of protection, stalking charges. All these were in the civil system and the family law system. We brought these cases to the court. It changed the whole outcome of the case, and that's because we didn't depend on the criminal system for finding criminal information. I
see. This is probably the one that bothers me the most, that people's mindset think criminal and don't think domestic or don't think that there's these different buckets that you've got to check, or these different, tires that you've got to put on, and
Right.
they might not be representative of the person that you're
Right.
really in front of.
And that reminds me, elder abuse and child abuse also are generally not reported in the criminal system.
Wow, that's
I don't know
surprising.
why,
That's
but
surprising.
a lot of counties put it under family law or domestic,
That's
and they
problematic.
don't list that as a criminal case.
Wow.
You could choke or take advantage of someone who's related,
Wow.
and that may be considered a family dispute and not a criminal case, although
I
it's
see.
very relevant. Also, you have military records, which are not in any county or federal system. There's a completely separate index conducted by a different agency, a military agency. And that's also not any misconduct or unfavorable discharge might not be in the criminal
I,
system. It might be in a different system.
I see. I see. Tell me about this FCRA compliance. Tell me a little bit
Right.
about why an employer needs to know that.
Yeah, the Fair Credit Reporting Act, which we call FCRA, has outlined the duties and requirements that credit reporting agencies, which is like us, like a private investigations company,
Yes.
which goes beyond credit, obviously, what they need to do. So it also gives some rights or, um, I guess, authority to an individual whose background is being checked.
Right.
So a credit reporting agency, we call them a CRA, has to get authorization either from the individual or there's a court case. We need something to go with in order to look at someone's private information. We just can't go run it because we want to.
I see.
And when we file a report with the company, we give them the results of our background check, for example,
Yes.
signed on our letterhead. And why it's signed is then the employer knows who did the work and who could be called to testify if it comes to that.
I see. I see. So the testimony part is really important, the signature. And again, it's that next level of verification,
Right.
because it's, a really live person that's doing it.
Right. All our reports are signed by an individual and we know who that individual is. So if there's an
I
issue,
see.
we can go back to our agent and say, how did you conduct it? Where'd you go? What agents did you employ to county by county to do the work? And, we just want to make sure that it's traceable, that we can go back. Like I said before, you can't bring a computer to court to testify. There should be an individual who did the work, who did the research, who did the hand search,
I see.
who did the skip trace, that can say exactly what they did.
So your private investigators show up in court and do the testimony thing, and do
If needed,
needed.
we hardly, and I'd say, I don't want to brag, but
Yes.
I'd say that of the 400,000 or 500,000 background checks we've conducted, we hardly miss anything, although I think a couple times somehow we have. Maybe we typed in something wrong.
Yeah.
But we've never had a case related to any kind of misconduct or something that we missed.
Okay.
A couple times we found that we did on our own when we do a recheck, not often, maybe 1 in 100,000, that something
Sure.
that
Caught
didn't
something.
show up, or maybe it wasn't in the court system then and it is now.
I see.
But we're very patient and careful. We'd rather be slow and accurate than fast and wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. There's
So, and we have to verify with the court. An FCRA requirement is to verify a case with the court directly that it's accurate. The date of birth
okay.
is right. The name is right.
Okay. Okay. And once this, signed authorization from the candidates, it allows you to be in compliance or thereabouts, right?
Right. The job candidate should sign an authorization and allow us, if there is an error, to give them the information, which is free,
Yes.
to go back and say, that was my twin brother.
Yeah.
Wrong date of birth. We've had that.
Yeah.
It's the wrong date of birth. He has my date of birth and my name, but it's not me. We've had that.
Yeah.
So a candidate has to have the right to go back and challenge your results. And at times, the results, the court data is wrong.
Awesome. So now we're coming up to number 7, because we are doing the 7 things. So, the employers have a duty to periodically recheck and rescreen. And why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Right. Well, as I mentioned before, about 3% of those that we recheck have new cases
Okay.
were filed and convictions that were filed after they were hired. And we recommend that all employers rescreen every 2 years. In some cases, like medical facilities, elder and child care,
Yes.
those who handle money, credit card information, pharmaceuticals, you want to check that annually.
I see.
You have a duty to your clients and for the safety of privacy and the people that they're caring for,
Yeah.
that you recheck more confidently and more often.
Okay. Well, we've came a distance now with this podcast, and we've kind of run through a whole bunch of really wonderful information. Take us through a little bit of the summary of this thing, and kind of walk us through what's at stake here.
Yeah. Well, first is that employers take on a tremendous responsibility to risk, and the penalties of not doing a complete background check are very high.
Mm-hmm.
So we wanted to bring that up and let them know. Using a licensed agency will reduce this exposure for workplace and employer liability. And knowing the myths about that should enlighten our employers as to
Yes.
what they should and should not do, especially when it comes to background checks.
Mm-hmm.
Next, we want to say that if you understand how a background check is performed, it gives the employer a lot of choices and a lot of information so that they don't make mistakes that could hurt them. And while a background check only may take 3 days to complete, we rather take our time and get it right than hurry up and get it wrong. And this protects, a comprehensive search will protect employers, will protect the workplace, and
Awesome.
reduce their risk from liability.
Awesome. So for more information about ways, NetCheck can help support employers, where should we go, and give us a website, and what should we do?
Sure. Well, first, anyone who wants to ask me questions about this information or others, I'd be happy to share. I feel like the more information you have, the better. And information is free. We want to help you. Our website is netcheckpi.com. There's a lot of valuable tools and information, other videos, other podcasts on there. And remember to our employers out there that information is power, that good decisions start with great information. So we want to give you great information. We want you to be powerful and be successful and take the steps necessary to make sure your workplace and your future looks great.
Well, this has been great. This has been a heck of a journey for you and I to be on a little bit. And I just feel grateful that, you asked me to ask you questions about it. And I sure learned a lot about this, and I'm looking forward to do the next one with you. And we'll be able to provide employers and business owners and individuals that are looking to have a private investigator work for them and support them in getting their needs for protection or privacy or information met, and ways that you can help them. And is there any closing thoughts or things that you'd like the audience to know?
Yeah, thank you, Bill. I think, you ask an expert. I wouldn't say that I know everything about everything, but I know a lot about background checks, and I'm very happy to help out. I want everyone to be safe. Obviously, I want to hold people responsible for the misconduct they've performed, and it's only fair that good people with good histories get given a chance first. And if you only knew now what you knew then,
yeah, exactly.
Only knew then what you knew now, either way. That's why you want to recheck all the time, and why you want to be thorough in your background checks for employment.
Well, Jonathan, thanks again for sharing your information with others, and more to come. Okay, buddy.
You're welcome, Bill. Thanks.
All right, take care. All right, bye.
All right.